So about a year ago, some of you know that Chris and I talked about it a lot. We were able to go to Germany and Austria. I know, here we are inside of Hallstatt, Austria. And it was our first time in Europe. We had absolutely no idea what to expect other than what was on, what we had read and looked up to. And like anytime you travel, it's easy to focus on the destination, but the journey itself can be tricky, especially if you don't know the lay of the land, you don't know the people, let alone the language. We knew there were places that we wanted to go. We knew there were things that we wanted to see. But honestly, how to get there and what to expect when we got there were still unknowns to us. Okay, so for the very first time, we're finally taking this trip, and don't know how to travel. Okay, there's trains, there's cars, all these things. Fortunately for us, we had here we are in was it Freising? I think it's day. The internet, man, in here it's terrible today. Come on. Slides, they're not that important. But I had more pictures. Let's try to see if we can get this to work here. There it is. Light delay. Oh, no, we're coming back. I know, right? Right? This is, so that's us in our first day. We're here in a little town called Freising, Germany. We're just glad to be there. And then this is a couple days later here. Let's come on. That's fine. It'll catch up. Everything's very slow. Here we are. Yeah, I know, right? It's called the Five Fingers, and it just overlooks this lake, and that's outside of Hallstatt. You go up this cable car. It's fantastic, and you hike, and yeah. And the picture is much bigger than that, and I was trying to how do I frame this to get the maximum effect? But there it is. You saw it. So it was weird. It was the first time we'd ever been on a trip like this, and it's probably the first time I think we had traveled together just by ourselves on such a big trip since our honeymoon. And so we didn't really know what to expect because we'd never been to Europe. But fortunately for us, we had two really good guides. Kristen's sister, number one, had just come back a couple months before from a trip, and she ended up going to many of the places that we had intended to go. So she had some insight. She's like, oh, well, you should do this, you should see this, you should experience this. And a lot of her advice was really, really good. And so I appreciated that. And then, of course, YouTube is a magical place where you can go and, you can find all these tour videos. They tell you everything you need to know. Some of them right down to the bus and the train numbers, and that was pretty rad. In fact, when we arrived in certain destinations, there was this familiarity there because as I'm watching, I go, oh, that looks just like the picture, right? And so I knew we were in the right place because this is what the video said to look out for. And so I literally recognized some of the signs. So I felt like I'd been there already because of of the preparation we had had. So it took a lot of anxiety out of our travels. And so, and honestly, guides can help make the unknown less scary, right? Now that we've been there, I have this much better idea of the scale of Europe. I know I would do again. I know a few of the things I might do differently, things that were a mystery to me because I only saw them on a map, are clear now, and I'm much more confident in my ability to traverse hikes and things like this. And I'm now, not only that, I'm also very happy to tell people what I learned. Like people are like, oh, I might go to Europe. I'm like, oh, let me tell you what you should do. Let me tell if you're there, you should do this, you should do that. I'm very excited to share with people my experiences and even pointing to the same resources that I used if it's going to help them to have as good an experience and as good a trip as Chris and I had. And I'm very grateful to everyone who took those trips before me and took video and recorded it and was willing to share because it was their guidance, their counsel that helped make our trip such a success. And I'm grateful that their knowledge was for my benefit because without them, the trip would have been a little bit harder and at the least a little scarier because, you kind of go into the unknown. You're like, what are we going to do? Are we on the right train? Because, here's the beautiful thing about Austria. Everyone speaks English, but I made a joke with Chris and I said, everyone speaks English except the bus drivers. And that was actually true. Because, everyone's like real friendly and then you get on the bus and you hear your ticket and the bus driver looks at you like you're an idiot. I'm like, sprechen Sie English? Like, okay, fine. And you just hope you end up in the right place. Just ask somebody else on the bus. Is this the bus to Untersberg? Yeah, you're fine. Okay, good. But here's the thing about travel is not the only place where we need guides. Life can be hard sometimes, right? Really, life can be hard sometimes. And it comes at us fast. Sometimes we can easily find ourselves in unfamiliar territory. The first time we experience anything is extremely difficult because it's usually the hardest because everything is new. The event is new, the emotions are new, the consequences are new, and as a result, it can be very overwhelming. Grief is a great example of this. It feels like you're drowning the first time you experience it because it's so overwhelming and he feels like there's no hope of rescue. And other loss or other pain or other affliction can be just as overwhelming, right? Illness can knock us down. When a doctor utters a diagnosis and this kind of that you hope you never hear, it can send you into a spiral. A loss of job or a livelihood, deep hurt, deep betrayal, some cases genuine persecution and personal attacks can lead us to really dark places. If you've ever had somebody go after your character, right? That is just like you don't know what to do, and you feel alone, and we can feel lost. And the next obvious things, the obvious things come out of just seem to fall out of focus. Like, what do I do next? How do I cope? And then, of course, the serious questions come, which is like, what? Why is this happening to me? Right? That's the question we ask ourselves. Why is this happening to me? What am I supposed to do with this? How am I supposed to handle it? Why do I feel so alone in this? And I think it's safe to say that in the midst of our pain and our affliction, it's natural to want comfort. And it's understandable that we would want people to help us through it, to find those guides to carry us through those times. Now, Paul, who wrote Corinthians, which is what we're looking at, he was someone acquainted with all sorts of these afflictions. Perhaps more than anybody, he experienced hardships for the sake of ministry. He was beaten, he was betrayed, he was broken throughout his life, even as he sought to do the right things. But he even told the Colossians, he says, now I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake, and in my flesh, he says, I am filling up what is lacking in Christ's afflictions for the sake of his body, that is the church, right? In other words, he would gladly take on this burden, these beatings, if it allowed him to better minister and serve the church and to be a better guide to them. And so what we see as we dive into 2 Corinthians in this book, he opens this book with Paul putting on some perspective on his challenges and showing us how he can use what God has brought him through to help other people. So we're going to dive in here. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is 2 Corinthians 1:3. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies, the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. For as we share abundantly in Christ's sufferings, so through Christ we share abundantly in his comfort too. If we are afflicted, it's for your comfort and salvation. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which you experience when you patiently endure the same sufferings that we suffer. And he says, our hope for you is unshaken, for we know that as you share in our sufferings, you will share in our comfort. Look, there's a lot to this passage. But here, the most important thing that Paul points out is this, the source of comfort. All right, if you like to fill stuff in, you can fill that in. But look at the source of comfort, okay? He says, blessed be the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies, the God of all comfort. And I think it's so important that we recognize this title of God, the God of all comfort, because it's easy to feel in our pain, in our affliction, that God has abandoned us, or that God is ignoring us, or that God is messing with us, right? It's amazing how easy for us to jump to, why would God do this to me, or why is God allowing me to go through this, as if God has some malicious intent and has just dumped this on you, expecting you to figure it out. Nothing could be further from the truth, because the Bible says he is not the God of messing with us, but he is the God of all comfort, right? It's pretty clear. See, we have to remember that we are sinful people. And I don't mean you, I mean us, the people. We are sinful people, and we live in a sinful and fallen world. So pain and affliction and the consequences of sin are a natural part of living in a world that has turned its back on God. Even sickness and pain are part of a broken world that sometimes feels like it's spinning off its axis. Pastor even alluded to some of that in his message today. And it's funny how many people want to reject God for allowing difficult things to happen, but how many people don't want to take responsibility for their part in some of those things happening in the world? It's always everybody else's fault, right? I get that. I've been there. Does God allow pain and calamity to happen? Yes, he absolutely does. Okay? And there's a number of reasons that God does that. Your challenges and your afflictions will always set out to demonstrate what God needs them to do. So why is God letting me go through stuff? Why is God letting me deal with stuff? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling this pain? There's a couple reasons why, and we could spend a whole message just talking about this, but your challenges will always demonstrate what God needs them to do in your life. Sometimes they'll strengthen your faith. Sometimes they'll make you more dependent on God. They will reveal, oftentimes, areas of your life where you need to trust his plan. And they will show you things that you've been keeping from God. More often than that, often the better things await us on the other side of bad things. Let me say that again. Oftentimes, better things await on the other side of bad things. I've shared that as part of my own testimony. The best things in my life have always come out of the worst things in my life. You think about this, in Genesis, Joseph's position in Egypt that led to the saving of thousands of lives was a result of his brothers' wickedness and sin. Paul told the Philippians that getting thrown in jail was a great thing for him. He said, look, I want you to know, brothers, that what happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. Those guys, they think they've got me chained up. They're chained to me, right? What's that? They say they're not, I'm not stuck in here with them. They're stuck in here with me. That was kind of Paul's attitude towards the gospel. We're all locked in here together. Let me tell you about Jesus. Oh, we can't leave. I know. Listen, here's this. I want you to hear this. And some of you need to hear this and take this to heart. God does not waste your pain. I know it feels like it, but God does not waste your pain. And he cares about your pain. And he's concerned about your pain. And God doesn't like you going through pain. He doesn't like the consequences of sin. He doesn't like seeing you hurt. Of course not. But it doesn't mean that God can't and won't use it to do great things in your life. I like to tell the story about the times that my kids needed their tonsils taken out because they were getting sinus infections left and right, like every month. And if you have kids and your kids get sinus infections, it's like nonstop. Ear infection, sinus, like every other month we just trade off. And finally the doctor's like, hey, these tonsils have got to come out. And it's miserable making your kids go through that. It's miserable being like, hey, take your medicine, take this Tylenol with codeine that burns your throat. It's for your own good, right? And it's hard as a parent to want to do that, but at the same time knowing that putting your kid in a knife was actually the thing that ultimately gave my kids some health, some healing. And so imagine then what God has to do in our lives all the time. Like, I don't want you to have to deal with this, but if we don't, we're never going to get through this. We're never going to have the health that you need to be the child that I want you to be. Now, there's this prevalent belief among the church that goes something like this. God will never give me more than I can handle. Does that sound true to you? And I'm not bashing anybody who said that, but I wholeheartedly disagree with that sentiment. I think God allows me to experience more than I can handle all the time, every day. The death of my father, the health of my kids, sometimes the overwhelming tide of work coupled with never-ending exhaustion, staying physically and emotionally strong to support others in their time of need, to be there for my family and to be there for other people. Look, I'm not strong enough to do all that. I think I'm strong enough and I don't need help is one of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves and that we tell each other. My pride says I'm strong enough, but my spirit knows better. So I don't like the statement, God will never give us more than we can handle, because I think it's disingenuous to our experiences. I think if we're honest with ourselves, we know that God gives us more than we can handle. In fact, look what Paul says in verse 8. He says, for we don't want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction that we experienced in Asia. For we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death. Does this sound like someone who hasn't received more than he can handle? But why would God allow his faithful servant to be afflicted so strongly? Look, the rest of the verse says this. He says, indeed, we felt we received the sentence of death, but that was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God who raised the dead, he says. Later in the same book, we'll look at it in a few weeks, he tells a story of how God revealed mysteries of heaven to Paul, okay? And he writes this, he says, so God calls him up into heaven, he experiences things, he sees things, and he doesn't really want to talk about it. He says, and so to keep me conceited, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me and to keep me from becoming conceited. And 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. Please, I'm over this, Lord. That sounds like a prayer you've made before. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest in me. My point is this. God will give you what you cannot handle so that we will trust him to handle it. God will give you what you cannot handle so that we will trust him to handle it. Because honestly, if I could handle it, would I need the Lord? Would I need God? I got this, God, I'll call you for the big ones. Well, what qualifies as a big one? That's what I want to know. My comfort comes from knowing that God can, that God will handle that which is bigger than me. And because he is the God of all comfort, it comes from him and it comes through him. And so what allows us to get through those difficult situations and what gives us comfort in the midst of those situations is the presence of God and our trust and our dependence on him. Is that easy? No. It's simple, but it's not easy. But God promises his presence. He says in Psalm 34, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted. He saves the crushed in spirit. He's the one that gives us grace and energy and strength. And he's the one that comes in and dwells with us and helps us through and gives us that comfort. Isaiah's prophecy of Jesus' ministry, he writes this. He says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to captives, and the opening of prison to those who are bound. And every one of Isaiah's examples is people who can't help themselves and who need the comfort and the hope of God to intervene in their life. So the promise of God is not that we will avoid conflict or pain and affliction in this life, but that God will be present and supportive and comforting in our distress, which means that, listen, the solution to comfort and affliction in our life is leaning harder into God. And you think, well, yeah, that totally makes sense. But if it makes sense, then why is it that when we struggle, we often pull away from God, right? We do. We kind of get away from God. We get away from the promises of his word, away from the fellowship of his people, and away from the deep well of his love. And if anything, those are the only things that will generally help us get through the worst of times. Like when we struggle, we tend to retreat from those things that are actually helpful to us, right? You know, why is it that when we feel down and we know the best thing we need to do is go and take a walk and get outside and get some exercise, like tub of ice cream? You know, it's like we automatically retreat to those things sometimes as opposed to running towards those things that are good for us. And listen, I want you to know this, the Word of God, you can write those things down. I don't think I have them in here. The Word of God is the thing that reveals God's promises and gives us proper perspective on our situation, even the responsibility that we have in it, okay? The second thing I have there is the fellowship of God's people, right? That provides a community where we receive support and counsel and prayer. Like if we can't be there for you in the midst of your hardest times, then what are we there for, right? And the third thing is this, the well of God's love. It's this deep reservoir that shows us that he will always take care of us and that God has our best interest in mind. Pastor Alistair Begg, he writes this. He says, in Jesus' own life, resurrection power came after crucifixion pain. Or resurrection power came after crucifixion pain. So true. The same pattern, he says, holds for us. It is in dying that we live. It is in weakness that we're strong. It is in emptiness that we are full. It is in self-forgetfulness that we find true security and confidence in God. And when God sovereignly allows affliction to shake up your life, remember that he has designed that very trial for you to draw closer to him, to rely more fully on him. And as you learn to rely on him more and more, his strength will shine through your weakness, and you will know true spiritual power even through the pain. How could Paul have such confidence? Well, look what he says in verse 10. He had such confidence in his comfort. He says, God, delivered us from such a deadly peril. He will deliver us. On him we have set our hope that he will deliver us again. Look at that. He delivered us, and he will deliver. And so Paul knew that God was so faithful. He knew that no matter what, whenever he ran into a trial, because of what God had done before, he was going to be the same yesterday, today, and forever, and follow through. And that, look, God delivered us, and he will deliver us. So here's where comfort comes in. When we think about what God has done, what God can do, when we look at how far we've come, we can recognize what God will continue to do. And here, if you want to write this down, the past informs our present and gives us a promise of the future. The past informs our present. God delivered, and I know that he will deliver. And so I live in his peace now because of the promise that's coming in the future. So the longer you walk with God and you see his strength fill in your weaknesses, the more comfort you can have that your worst afflictions are in God's capable hands because he is the God of all comfort. But here's the thing. The God's comfort in our lives isn't just for us. And the verse here makes it really clear what we're supposed to do when we've been comforted by God, and that is simply the sharing of comfort. The sharing of comfort. Okay, what is that? Well, he says, the God of all comfort who comforts us in all of our afflictions so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort which we ourselves are comforted by God. So once God has led you through difficulty and affliction, what are you supposed to do? Well, according to this verse, we now have the opportunity to lead others through their challenges as well, right? The Word of God reveals God's promises, reveals God's love, and as a guarantee that he will do what's best for us. But it is here, and this is so important for all of us today, the fellowship of God's people that we often find the encouragement and the guidance that we need. And it is the tangible work of the body of Christ that often helps us cope. Remember those guides that we talked about earlier, right? Those guides, those people that help us find our way around. There's great comfort in the midst of your afflictions when you meet someone who has been where you've been, who knows the lay of the land, who knows the language, who's come through, right? Just knowing you're not alone is comfort. Sometimes just sitting with someone who's grieving and they're not alone is enough. Seeing someone who has made it through helps you to believe that you can too. Learning from those who have walked the path gives you the chance to benefit from their wisdom. And the knowledge that people are in your corner ready to hold you up and to cheer you on when you can't go any further is great encouragement. So there's two takeaways from this part of the verse. And here's the first one. When you're lost, look out for the guides. When you're lost, when you're struggling, when you're hurting, look for those who have gone on the path. Find those people. So what did you do? How did you get through this? Okay? Don't be afraid to ask for help, to seek advice, or simply admit that you're in over your head. That's what the church is supposed to be about, caring for one another, giving others a chance to help you through. And sometimes we end up dealing with things we were never meant to deal with on our own. Okay? I know it can be hard to find those people sometimes, right? And maybe we don't like being like a burden. That's the thing that always catches us. Well, I don't want to be a burden to anybody. You know, working in the fire department, it's a bunch of A-type macho, I'm good, I'm tough. Like, okay, sure you are. But you don't have to be an A-type macho person just to be prideful and say, I don't want to be a burden. I'm going to tell you right now, for the person who has come through difficulty and affliction and gotten to the other side and who knows how hard it is to handle, they will be eager to step in and help. Some people just want to be asked, how can I help you? I've been there. Let me help you. So, when you're lost, look out for the guys. But when you make it out to the other side, look out for the lost. Look out for those people. When you reach the other side of your afflictions and trials, look back at those who might be struggling, because I have seen God be so faithful in the midst of my struggles. I will happily tell people how he will be faithful in theirs. But here's the caveat, and this is what I want us to get, all right? The ability to comfort others only comes when we've been comforted. So what do you mean? Well, we need to ask, how much have we leaned into God? Have we allowed our afflictions and our circumstances to make us better or bitter? See, some people try to help people and they're still dealing with it. And they're just using those other people to process their own pain. But that's not what we're there for. Misery loves company, right? We find someone else who's going through it and go, yeah, sucks, right? Let's go. Let's be mad together. That's not it. We need to get to when we get to the other side and God has brought healing and restoration and health, spiritual health, that's when we need to look out for those who are lost. And so have we allowed our afflictions and circumstances to make us better or bitter? And we can only help others if we allow our difficulties to make us better or bitter. And that's a choice that we have to make, because listen, God doesn't waste our pain, but if we're not careful, we will. Okay. Well, so what? All right, what's the so what today? From this verse could have been, I'm going to be honest with you, sometimes I start writing a message and it ends up nowhere near where I thought it was going to go. But here's what I want us to take away from today. Look, God absolutely will give us more than we can handle, but he never expects us to handle it alone. Okay? He never expects us to handle alone. In the midst of our affliction and trials, that's where God offers us comfort. He does that through God's word. He does it through God's people and through the overwhelming well of his love. God knows that we'll have trouble in this world. He also knows that a lot of that trouble is for our own good. So even in hard times, God promises his presence, his strength to get through, knowing that something better is on the other side. More than that, the reason God comforts us is so that we can comfort others. The reason God takes us through afflictions is so that we can help take others through them, or at least, the very least we can do is we can guide people closer to Jesus. We can point them to God so he can take them through. And afflictions and trials and challenges can be scary, but when someone comes along and says, hey, I've been where you are, I get it, that offers comfort. When you tell people, you can get through this, I did, that offers comfort. And when we can show people some of the beauty that rises from the ashes, that is comfort. So I'm grateful for people who have guided me through some very difficult times, even if their only role was to point me back to God, the source of all comfort. And since so often, just knowing I wasn't alone and that my feelings were valid, like I'm not crazy, was a huge comfort. Because in a lot of ways, it meant I was on the right track. So what a privilege we have that when God has used others to comfort us, that there comes a time where we get to be used by God to comfort other people and get them through. All right. Lord, thank you for the word of God.